To the order of business. The final draft agenda approved by the Conference of Presidents on the 29th of March under Rule 149 has been distributed. Following consultations with the political groups, I wish to put to the House the following proposal for changes to the final draft agenda. The statement by the President of the Eurogroup on the state of play of the second review of the Economic Adjustment Programme for Greece will be replaced, because of the decision, as I said, by President of the Eurogroup, by Council and Commission statements with the same title and in the same slot. Are there any objections? Mr. Weber.
Herr Präsident,
President, the EPP group supports the amendment to the title, but I would like to express the fact that it is a scandal that the President of the Eurogroup, although the President of the Conference of Presidents unanimously called for this, and you also passed on the wish for this as President of the European Parliament. The President of Eurogroup feels it's not important to appear in the European Parliament. We are debating important issues such as Greece. That is unacceptable behaviour, Mr. President, and it shows a lack of respect vis-à-vis the European Parliament. And we would like you to express this, please, to the President of the Eurogroup. Moreover, I would like to call on the Socialists, because he is indeed a social democrat. Dijsselbloem is a representative of the Social Democrats, and I would like to call on the Socialists to have discussions with their party friends as well to see if it's possible for Dijsselbloem to appear here. And I would, in particular, colleagues, like to make it clear that last week Dijsselbloem gave interviews. We, as the EPP group, want Europe to stand together. We want the rules to be respected, but we think it's not correct when he expressed views about those countries that were helped last year, that received assistance. That shows a lack of respect, particularly for those countries which are under these programs, and we feel it is not compatible with Dijsselbloem staying in his position. We think he should resign.
Onorevole Pittella.
Mr. Pittella. President, the position of the Socialist Group on this topic is very clear. We expressed this at the Conference of Presidents on various occasions when we said that it was unacceptable that Mr. Dijsselbloem has chosen not to come to the Parliament. We repeat that objection again. And before Mr. Weber, much earlier than him, we said it was disgraceful, that the interview that he gave was disgraceful, and not just the disgraceful comments concerning Mediterranean countries, southern countries that are spending money on women and wine, but it's also what he said was disgraceful vis-à-vis women. And Mr. Dijsselbloem, through that interview, but also on earlier occasions, had shown that he hasn't got the right attitude to be the President of the Eurogroup. That is the position of the Socialist Group. That is the position of many Socialist leaders. And I hope that that is the position as well of the Christian Democrat leaders as well, who so far have been the real champions of Mr. Dijsselbloem.
Honorable Lamberts.
Mr. Lamberts.
Monsieur le Président,
President, well, I'm not going to go on it length. I'd just like to point out that the attitude of the President of the Eurogroup, I think, is part and parcel of his conduct, which is disdainful to the public and to the citizens. And we see it now in relation to our institution, which is at the very source of a greater and greater, the rebellion of a greater number of citizens against our institutions. So I think it's important, as you said, that the Parliament represents its deep disagreement with this kind of arrogance. But, Mr. Weber, I did understand that you called Mr. Dijsselbloem as a socialist. Well, it's been a long time since I started thinking that it's because you officially are a socialist that you conduct yourself like a socialist. I do like to make the distinction. Thank you.
Honorable Zimmer.
Mrs. Zimmer.
Very briefly as well, last week in the Conference of Presidents, we discussed this question, and you said that you really don't want to invite Mr. Dijsselbloem once again and have him turn around and say no again. What we have to make clear, I think, both vis-à-vis the Council and also vis-à-vis the Eurogroup, is that this is not acceptable, not tolerable behaviour. Dijsselbloem is in an important role, particularly in implementing measures vis-à-vis certain countries in the European Union, and he has no right then to refuse the MEPs on various occasions. And on the interview as well, Mr. Dijsselbloem is the wrong person for the Eurogroup, and he should stand down. He shouldn't wait until he's replaced by someone else. President, on behalf of ECR, we would like to condemn the position of Mr. Dijsselbloem. The Eurogroup is one of the bodies which is imposing measures which reduce salaries, pensions, and is implementing anti-popular policies. Mr. Dijsselbloem dare not come along to defend the decisions taken by the Eurogroup. Also, with the many statements he makes, his declarations, he has provoked all the people of Europe. He has provoked the Parliament. And we believe he daren't come along in order to accept his responsibilities. Those are the facts. We think that he should basically step down from the Eurogroup, and that is the responsibility of the leaders of the European Union, so they should take their decisions. This man cannot be president of the Eurogroup. He cannot insult our people in this way. Thank you.
De GRAAFF, please.
Mr. de GRAAFF.
Meneer de voorzitter, ik sluit me aan bij de...
President, I support the criticisms that have been expressed toward Mr. Dijsselbloem by my colleague, the President. It is a scandal. It's a lack of respect. Despite all the efforts that have been made in the countries of the south of Europe, and despite all the misfortunes that people are living through because of the austerity policy, so I join what Mr. PITTELLA said. It's a scandal the way he spoke about women. It's absolutely unacceptable. And I think that we have to express these criticisms in a letter that we sent to Mr. Dijsselbloem.
VERHOFSTADT.
Mr. Verhofstadt.
I'm going to be very short. I think that beyond the fact that we are all scandaled by the attitude of Mr. Dijsselbloem, we have to ask ourselves that there is also a more question of principle here. And the question of principle is the following. He is the president of the Eurogroup. And so he is saying, yeah, my masters are the Eurogroup. That are the ministers of finance. That problem can be solved by us. And that is by doing what is already in a number of our reports. And that is to make a permanent president of the Eurogroup who is under the scrutiny of the Parliament. One of the ideas is to say, why not making the president of the Eurogroup can be, for example, a vice president of the Commission. And this vice president of the Commission will automatically be accountable before the Parliament. So it's very good. I agree with what Mr. Weber has said and all other colleagues, but let's also take the consequences of it. We can solve it in the coming years by making a permanent president, member of the Commission, accountable to this House. Thank you.
Onorevole Agea.
Honourable Member Agea.
Onorevole Agea.
Ms. Agea.
Dall'onorevole Zanni, allora.
Mr. Zanni, Mr. Valli. Mr. Valli. Thank you. My group as well, the EFDD, is upset by the words expressed by the President of the Eurogroup. What he said was scandalous. we feel he should resign as well as soon as possible. Of course, it will be up to the heads of state and government to take a decision, but we feel it's disgraceful that he hasn't accepted an invitation from this Parliament to address a very serious situation prevailing in Greece and southern states, that he's also offended with his words. And apart from discussing that Greece with him, we would also like to discuss the words he's used with him. But now we're waiting for a reaction from the President. Thank you.
CHOUNTIS.
President, colleagues, our position on Mr. Dijsselbloem has been expressed by the President of the group who just expressed our views beforehand. We are angry at the provocation and insult to our colleagues and the European Parliament. But this has become a more general debate, Mr. President, and we've heard various issues. So I would like to ask, who gave these possibilities, these competences to the President of the Eurogroup and more generally to the Eurogroup? Mr. Dijsselbloem came along and he shouted about the Cypriots and he talked about the memoranda. Was he correct then? Was he correct when he came to the plenary not too long ago and presented the report on the future of Europe? Now, we've seen the credibility of the clout of the Eurogroup, and instead of talking about this, we should rather be thinking about what we have accepted as the European Union, as the Eurozone, and think of that in terms of Dijsselbloem and his powers and those of the Eurogroup. Thank you.
Monsieur Lamassoure, vous voulez intervenir?
Mr. Lamassoure, did you want to speak on this subject?
En attendant qu'une réforme du type
We're waiting for a reform of the type proposed by President Verhofstadt, or Chairman Verhofstadt. The Parliament cannot leave unanswered this new disdain that Mr. Dijsselbloem has expressed. And I think we have to apply a principle that we've applied to all people and enterprises who've refused to cooperate with the European Parliament, with some of its committees, some of its groups, which consists of declaring this person a persona non grata in the House. And because he doesn't want to come to the plenary, he will never be admitted into any meeting of the European Parliament. I think that's the least of the responses that we can give. Thank you.
Non possiamo fare un dibattito.
Well, I don't think we can hold a debate now. We've heard from each of the political groups. Mr. Lamassoure has made a proposal. Mr. BÜTIKOFER?
President, on behalf of everybody who hasn't spoken, I would like to express our denunciation of Mr. Dijsselbloem too.
Bene, allora mi pare.
Well, it seems to me that there is a unanimity here. Mrs. Berès, what do you want to say?
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President, for inaugurating this way of proceeding in the hemicycle, which means that in a very impromptu fashion, all of a sudden, Monday at 5 o'clock, a special hour in this hemicycle, we have a debate on the presidents of the Eurogroup. So I note with pleasure the support that Mr. Weber has given to the countries who are suffering from what the Troika has been doing. This is a day that we have to welcome.
Are you commenting on the order of business?
Président.
Vous allez proposer quelque chose?
Are you proposing something relating to the order of business?
C'est que vous...
Yes, I'm suggesting something. You should have closed this debate earlier. The essential thing is the debate that we're going to have tomorrow, to know what the Council and the Commission are going to do concerning Greece. And then, in that context, everyone will be able to give their opinion on what the Eurogroup is doing in that country, including the mandate inside the Eurogroup, that some ministers of finance in the group who do not want to revise the program.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I am proud to preside over a parliament where there is a unanimous rejection of this attempt by the President of the Eurogroup to show disrespect, to turn down an invitation from the representatives of the European people. So I will send a formal letter of protest to the President of the Eurogroup saying that the European Parliament unanimously rejects this attitude, an attitude of this type on behalf of someone who holds such an important office.
Passiamo a lunedì.
Let's move on to the Monday. Mr. CASPARY, a number of members reaching the low threshold have asked that the oral question on Commission's answers to written questions addressed to the Commission be added as a second item after the oral question on the trafficking of human beings. I'll give the floor to Mr. CASPARY to move the request.
Dear colleagues, every one of us knows an example where we put a simple written question to the Commission and didn't get a proper answer. Because of this, I organized a kind of grassroots initiative to have an oral question with debate to the European Commission about that. In the year 2015, 157 members of this House signed, but after 3 months, this oral question lapsed. Now I started this initiative again in January this year, and 246 members signed, but this oral question will again lapse if we don't put it on this week's agenda. Dear colleagues, I think it is not acceptable that 246 members ask for an oral question and nothing happens. And therefore, we have good luck. According to the services, this week there is some time, and so we can add this point to the agenda without removing another one. Therefore, I ask you to support this request, that we have the debate tonight, and please, even if it is very short notice, take the opportunity to take part. Thank you very much.
Would anyone like to speak against the proposal from Mr. CASPARY? Okay, let's move to the vote. Those in favour of adding this item to the agenda, please show. Those against? Abstentions? That request is carried. So the oral question about Commission's answers to written questions will be added as a second item after the oral question on the trafficking of human beings. I'd also like to inform the plenary that the first letter that I sent as President to the President of the Juncker Commission concerned specifically the quality of the Commission's replies. So in my first letter I talked about the quality of replies to the MEP's questions. Obviously we need to reduce the number of questions, but we need to upgrade the quality of answers to the questions that members do ask. Let's move on to Tuesday. The Europe of Nations and Freedom group has asked for a full debate on the report by Mr. Ashworth on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the financial year 2018, Section 1, European Parliament, are currently included in Wednesday's votes. It would be added as the fifth item in the afternoon after the joint debate on the revision of the multi-annual financial framework. As a consequence, the sitting would then be extended to 24 midnight. I'll give the floor to Mr. Zanni to remove the request from the ENF group.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. On behalf of the ENF group, I would ask that tomorrow afternoon, as a fifth item on the agenda, after the debate on the revision of the multi-annual financial framework, that you would have a debate on the Ashworth report on the question of the state of play on for the Section 1 part. As you said, we should probably have to extend the session until midnight. I think it is a good thing to discuss in this hemicycle how the institution deals with its own budget in the public eye. We should always have transparency, and I don't see why this year we should have gone for this unusual procedure which strips the Parliament of one of its major prerogatives. So I would ask that this amendment should be put to the vote via a roll call vote. Thank you.
Would anyone like to take the floor to speak against? So I put the request to the vote by roll call vote. There's a request for the ENF group They're asking for a full debate on the report by Mr. Ashworth on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the financial year 2018, Section 1, European Parliament. The vote is open.
La votazione è chiusa.
The vote is closed. The request is rejected, so the agenda is not amended.
Passiamo a mercoledì.
Let's move on to Wednesday. The ALDE, S&D and EPP group have asked that there be a statement by the Commission on the situation in Venezuela be added in the afternoon. The ALDE group has asked that this statement be added as a sixth point after the report from Mr. Weigel on the 2016 report on the former Macedonian Republic. The S&G group has asked that this statement be added as a fifth point after the statement of the Commission on the adequacy of the protection provided by the EU-USA Privacy Shield, and the EPP group has asked that this declaration be added as a fourth point after the Gabriele report on third countries whose nationals are subject to or exempt from a visa requirement, Ukraine. And the debate would then be wound up by a motion for resolution we voted on at the April 2 part session. Is there anyone from ALDE to introduce this, or shall we move straight on to the vote? Or are my explanations sufficient? Can we move straight to the vote? Someone would like to speak against? Thank you very much, President. Well, I think there's a lot to say about Venezuela, but not in the way we normally debate it. The example of Venezuela is that what we see is a sovereign expression of self-determination of a people. I don't think this is the right place to discuss it, because we're ignoring the real causes of the economic crisis in Venezuela, and we're just what that's doing is just supporting the extreme right wing, which are actually giving rise to disorder in the country, and they're not, and the right wing does not respect the sovereign powers of the parliament. It boycotts negotiations, and debate here will not help bring back serenity in that country. It won't help the dialogue that's otherwise. In fact, it's interfering in the sovereign affairs of an independent country. We reject that. So also I'd like to remind you, President, two issues relating to the statements that was made by you. You said you were talking on behalf of the European Parliament, President, and I'd also like to remind the President that the President hasn't got a peer you haven't got somebody who's a counterpart to you in Venezuela, so you can't say that you're speaking on behalf of the Parliament to appear in Venezuela.
Io mi sono attenuto sempre.
I have always respected the votes in the Parliament, and also I respect the motion for resolution which have been supported by a majority here against political prisoners, in favour of democracy and freedom, and the Parliament has always expressed itself in this way, and I've always respected the motion for resolution adopted by large majorities here. I've always respected the majority opinion of the European Parliament. I think today there's also a broad majority in favour of what I said in the past. And now Mrs. Becerra has asked for the floor. Mrs. Becerra, have you asked for the floor?
I'd just like to speak on behalf of the Labour Group to confirm that the opportunity of debating this Wednesday in the plenary is very important. We have to confirm our position, which is to monitor the dismantling which has been happening during the course of all this time. What we need to debate here, and what we have to resolve in this resolution, this joint resolution, is that the constitutional order in Venezuela has very obviously been dismembered. The movement of Maduro's government to get the Supreme Court to take away all the competence of the Parliament, which represents the citizens, is so as anti-constitutional as the earlier order to implement it again. So you're talking about sovereignty, democracy. What's certain is in Venezuela, there's no separation of powers, there's no real democracy, and our obligation as a parliament is to strengthen the position of the European Parliament. That Mrs. Mogherini this week made very clear liberation of the political prisoners, restoring the constitutional order, and democratic elections in Venezuela now. And this week is the time in which the Organization of American States is going to adopt a position, and we have to be at their side.
Onorevole Preda per il gruppo.
Mr. Preda.
Chairman, our group supports the request to have a debate about Venezuela, and we would like that this point should be discussed as early as possible on Wednesday and not towards midnight. And we would like to have a resolution voted in the second session of April. Thank you.
Onorevole Rodrigues per il gruppo.
Mr. Rodrigues, on behalf of S&D.
Let me clarify that S&D Group does support the idea of a debate, but doesn't consider that we should have a resolution. So we just want the debate to take place.
Adesso votiamo e qui.
Well, we're going to put it to the vote, and we will see then what is the decision taken. The first vote will be whether we add a Commission declaration on the situation in Venezuela on Wednesday in the afternoon. Those in favour of adding this item to the agenda, please show. Those against? Abstentions? The majority is in favour of including a new item on the agenda. Now we need to vote on when we should include the declaration in the debate. As requested from ALDE after the sixth point after the Weigel report, the S&D requested as a fifth item and the EPP requested the fourth item. So let's vote the ALDE proposal to begin with as the sixth point. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? It appears to be rejected. S&D Group proposes the fifth point. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Rejected. The request from the EPP Group as the fourth item. Do you want to check that? Okay, let's check on the Socialist proposal, therefore, as the fifth item.
La votazione è chiusa.
Voting is closed. And that proposal is rejected. As requested by the EPP now as the fourth item. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Carried. So it will be included as the fourth item. And now I would like to put to the vote the request from EPP on following the debate with a resolution to be voted on in the April 2 session. Those in favour of the EPP proposal, for a resolution in other words. Those against? I think it's in favour, but let's check.
Il voto è.
Voting is closed. And the EPP proposal is carried. Therefore, to sum up, the Commission statement on Wednesday afternoon, that will be the fourth item after Mr. Gabriel's report. I'll give you the floor, yes, as soon as I finish speaking. And then the debate will be followed by a resolution to be voted on in the April 2 session. Mr. Ferrand, you have asked for the floor.
Thank you, President. On this debate on Venezuela, we asked several times in the Conference of Presidents that we have a debate on the European Union and the United States since the election of Trump last November. And there's been no debate. And I think that we're putting the horse before the cart. We're getting interested in Venezuela without getting interested in the American administration. I think it's necessary to have a real debate today on the administration and the relation between the United States and South America.
Mr. Ferrand, in the course of the debate, you can say whatever you want to say, and your political group can express all of its ideas on this question. So the agenda is thereby established. I haven't received any requests to amend the final agenda, so let's continue. The first item on the agenda is an oral question to the Commission on the European Solidarity Corps.